Hi guys! Here's a quick video on finding outliers in a data set. So as you know, with finding outliers, there are a few steps that we have to do before we find our lower fence and upper fence to determine if there are any outliers. So first thing we want to do is find the IQR, which is Q3 minus Q1. So we use the calculator. We're going to go to menu, stat, and you're going to enter in your data set in list 1, like I already did, and then we're going to hit F2 for calc and F1 for one variable statistics. We scroll down a little bit, and then here we're going to see that our Q1 is 70 and our Q3 is 80. So our IQR is Q3 minus Q1, which is just 80 minus 70, which is 10. Next step, we want to use our IQR to find the lower boundary. Our lower boundary is Q1 minus 1.5 times the IQR. And it's always going to be this 1.5 number. So we have Q1, which is 70, minus 1.5 times our IQR, which is 10. We're going to put all of that in the calculator. 70 minus 1.5 times the IQR. And when you're entering this in the calculator, make sure that your parentheses is around that 10. And we have that our lower boundary, or sometimes it's called lower fence, is 55. For the upper boundary, or the upper fence, it's Q3 plus 1.5 times the IQR. So for the lower fence, it's a subtraction, and for the upper fence, it's an addition. So Q3, which is 80, plus 1.5 times the IQR, 10. Go ahead and put that all in your calculator, and be sure to keep that parentheses around the 10, and we get 95. Perfect. So before we determine the outliers, let's just create the little diagram to match this with the box plot. So here all we're using is Q1 and Q3. So our Q1 is 70. That's right here. Q3 is 80. And then we found that our lower fence is 55 over here. And our upper fence is 95 over here. Perfect. So, how do we determine whether there are any outliers in the data set? Well, we use our lower fence and our upper fence to do that. Let's look at the upper fence first. We found that our upper fence value, or the upper outlier boundary, is 95. So if I want to know if there's any outliers in the data set, I need to look for numbers that are larger than 95. Notice that our data set stops at 90. We don't have any numbers larger than 90. We don't have any numbers larger than 95 specifically. So we don't have any outliers on the upper side or over the upper fence of our data set. Next, if we want to determine whether there are outliers on the lower fence or the lower side of the data, we're going to look at our lower boundary number, which is 55. So we're going to look at our data set to see whether we have values that are lower or smaller than 55. And yes, we do. 45 is smaller than 55. So 45 would be considered an outlier here, right? Notice in the diagram that we drew out, our fence stopped right here at 55. And we have 45 in our data set, which would be placed right over here. So since this 45 is outside or below our fence, then 45 is considered our outlier. Since we don't have any number greater than 95 or any number greater than our upper boundary, then we don't have any outliers on the upper side of the data set, which is fine. And that's it. So 45 is our only outlier. If we looked at the data set, we could have guessed that 45 would be an outlier just because it's way smaller than the rest of the data, because the rest of the data are like 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. However, it's not always true that the number we guess is going to be an outlier. Sometimes there could be a smaller number that's significantly smaller than the rest of the data, but it could still not be an outlier. So it's always good to double check and calculate it. All right, cool. Hope this helped. Bye.